Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Danny Smyth, S-M-Y-T-H. I'm the Chief of Police here in Winnipeg. Let me begin this afternoon first by offering my condolences to the Toronto Police Service, who is grieving the death of Constable Jeffrey Northrup, who was killed in the line of duty last night while responding to a call. Our thoughts are with his family and our colleagues at the Toronto Police Service. A big part of policing is standing on guard to preserve peace and public safety. Occasionally, we are asked to assist at public demonstrations. And yesterday, we did just that. People in our community walked in support of Indigenous peoples, and in particular in support of those impacted by residential schools. Now, there were two walks organized by separate groups yesterday, and we were in contact with organizers from both groups days in advance of yesterday's walk. We collaborated with the organizers to ensure that everyone could safely participate and move to their intended locations. Now, for us, that largely meant controlling traffic and safely escorting those that were walking. Now, the first group gathered at the Canadian Human Rights Museum and walked from the Forks to Portage and Main, and then along Portage, where they came to the Peguis First Nations buildings at Portage and Dominion. The second group actually gathered at Portage and Main and walked along Portage and then headed south on Memorial, where they gathered at the Legislative grounds. So these were community members who were there mourning for the lost children of the residential schools. So it's important to keep that in mind. These events were intended to be peaceful demonstrations of solidarity, and the vast majority of the people who attended were peaceful. Now, the risk for us and the risk to any large gathering is that there may be some within the crowd who have a different agenda. And that is what we witnessed at the end of the afternoon when a small number of people determined to damage property on the grounds. Now, I can tell you that when that occurred, the majority of the assembled people at the Legislative began to leave the site. Our event coordinator, along with supervisors and frontline members, did not directly engage with those that were damaging the statues. We did not want to further incite the crowd that had gathered. And I want to make it clear, I commend our members for their professionalism yesterday and their ability to preserve a safe environment. And later, their ability to de-escalate a volatile situation that was started by a small number of individuals. To be clear, some of our members were assaulted and spit on. Several of our police cars sustained damage after being struck by objects, including rocks and paint. This was a delicate situation to balance. Now, going forward, we will, in fact, be investigating this to determine who was involved in this. And it should come as no surprise. Everyone knows that the Legislative grounds have multiple security cameras, so we'll be reviewing that and determining an investigation. I also want to make it clear that I have heard from many Indigenous leaders in the community. They do not condone the actions of that small number of people, and they were really quite concerned for the well-being of our members, whose presence they greatly appreciated. I certainly appreciated hearing from them, and I am there to support them through this difficult period in our shared history. Now, those are the only prepared remarks I have. I'm certainly open to some questions.
We'll begin taking questions. We'll start with James from the Sun.
Good afternoon, Chief Smyth. Pretty challenging audio here on my end. Why didn't police officers step in greater numbers to prevent this vandalism in the first place?
So whenever you have a gathering crowd of more than 1,000 people, it's a delicate situation. You certainly don't want to incite the crowd. It's a judgment call based on what's happening. There was no violence going on towards other people, and it was largely It was largely property, in this case statues, that were being damaged. It was a judgment call that I support.
Follow-up, James?
No, thank you.
Next, Malak from from Free Press.
Hi, Chief Smith. Audio is also a little challenging on my end, so apologies if this was already mentioned. I know there were statements released from Indigenous leaders condemning violence at the Legislature on Thursday. I guess outside of the statue being vandalized, I think you mentioned police being subject to some unkind treatment. Could you be a little more specific in terms of possible violence at the Legislature, where people actively kind of putting other people in harm's way? Like, what did the police see in that regard?
No, I think what was witnessed was largely property damage. I can tell you about an hour after the main assembly, there was an individual arrested for damaging a private vehicle on another location on the legislative grounds. A 51-year-old male was arrested and later released in the afternoon. He'll be charged with mischief and actually assault PO.
I hope you got that, Malak. Any follow-up?
Yeah, the end bit of that might have been part of this question, but I was also hoping for some follow-up on the arrest that police made on the grounds. I know it was reported that a person was tased. I was told earlier today, or someone from the Free was told earlier today, that wasn't true. Could you clear that up by any chance?
I'm not in a position to clear that up. I'm led to believe those charges haven't yet been laid, so I haven't been briefed on the specifics of the arrest. I do know that a male was arrested on the site. He wasn't involved in the statues, but was involved in damaging a private vehicle on another part of the site. He will be charged with mischief for damaging the vehicle and assault PO. He took a combative stance with the police.
Thank you.
All right, Steve from Canadian Press.
Hi, and again, apologies because the audio is not great, so I'm just hoping for some more detail. Chief, you mentioned this person is accused of damaging a private vehicle, so it's not a police vehicle. Could you go into more detail about where this vehicle was and who it might belong to in terms of was it a politician? Was it a member of the police force? Was it something else?
No, I actually don't know who the owner of the vehicle is. This day will be largely spent collecting and gathering information. There's a lot of investigation that will go on. In fairness, we wanted to come out here and provide you with what we have, but I don't have a lot of detail as to the arrest. I can tell you that it happened at the very end of the afternoon, largely after most of the crowd had dissipated. It was, I believe, on one of the side lawns of the ledge, but I'm not sure which one.
And you mentioned the multiple cameras that are stationed outside the legislature. It's an area of high surveillance. Do you expect many people to be charged with vandalism or mischief directly relating to the toppling of the two statues?
I don't know the answer to that. I know it will be investigated. I'll leave that in the hands of our investigators who commenced their investigation this morning.
I'll move on. Next is Mel Deschamps, Radio Canada.
It's all good on my part.
Thank you very much. Next up is Joe from Global.
Afternoon, Chief. I know you kind of already touched on this a little bit, but I was wondering if you could just, maybe give a little bit more of your personal reaction to the news when you first found out about the incident.
Of course, I'm disappointed. I know the intent of all of the organizers involved was to have a peaceful demonstration, a show of solidarity for the Indigenous people in our community and solidarity for the lost children of the residential schools. I don't think anyone was expecting that to occur, and it's disappointing. I guess, I've had an opportunity to speak with many of the Indigenous leaders in our community, and that's more or less been the shared sentiment.
Any follow? Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, so, I imagine we're going to see more events like this if and when more unmarked graves are discovered. And again, I guess you kind of like already touched on this a little bit, but what's the message to the community going forward? I was at the ledge earlier, and I was speaking to one man who he wasn't involved, but basically said he's expect more things like this to be happening. So what would be the message to the community?
Well, I think we all stand in support with those, in support of the Indigenous community. We just don't expect anybody to do things that aren't peaceful. I think all of the leaders involved in this expect to have peaceful demonstrations. I don't think it's helpful to turn these things into violence, or whether that's damaging property or violence against other people. So, we take great pride in Canada of being able to protest, our right to protest, and certainly the police facilitate that all the time. We probably help facilitate dozens of events like this every year, and we will continue to do that. We just don't expect there to be violence.
Next up, Jeff from CTV.
Oh, hi, Chief. Jeff from CTV. Could you speak a little more specifically about what you know about the damage? Obviously, the statues were toppled. But just looking at the Queen Victoria one, for example, it does appear that maybe some of it's missing. Like, do you know if things were taken? Do you know how damaged these statues and anything else are?
The only thing I've seen is what I've seen on social media, so I don't know the answer to that, Jeff. As I said, our major crimes investigators commenced their investigation this morning. Today is going to be largely about collecting information and evidence, and as we learn more, we'll let you know.
Follow up, Jeff?
Yeah, and I know Steve, I think, asked this, but again, I couldn't quite hear. Do you expect more arrests connected to the damage with the statues, and I guess any police cruisers or anything like that? Because it does sound like the other arrest maybe was unrelated, but did you expect arrests or charges for the actual damage at the legislature?
So again, just to clarify, the arrest that people have been talking about was unrelated to the statues and the property damage on the grounds during the demonstration. This largely occurred about an hour later with a private vehicle. I don't know whether there'll be charges. I will leave that in the hands of our investigators. Certainly there is the potential for charges to be to come out of this. Clearly that would fall under a charge of mischief for damaging property.
Mike from City.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chief. Just verifying, when police arrived on Mass originally, that was because of a call for the private vehicle being tampered with?
To be clear, we were part of the working with the organizers throughout. We controlled traffic and had an escort presence for all of the walkers, of both groups, the one that headed up to the Peguis building on Portage and Dominion, and the group that ended up at the Legislature. So we weren't sent there en masse afterwards. We were present throughout. The call at the end there, that was largely after the demonstration was over. There were some residual people still hanging around, and there were some additional units dispatched at that time.
And then my follow-up question. I understand not wanting to escalate the situation, but when police were trying to pull out and the cruisers were being hit, and we've seen on social media some people were running up and banging on a window of a police cruiser. I mean, at that point, did officers do the right thing in continuing to pull out?
Again, I think I said this at the beginning. Our intent in a crowd situation is never to incite the crowd to greater violence. I thought they showed remarkable restraint and de-escalated that situation by retreating, and I think it was the right thing to do, and I certainly support them on that.
Riley from CBC.
Yeah, so just, I guess to clarify, so the one person is facing charges at this point. Are there any others in custody yet in connection with this, or is it just the one so far?
There's only one person that's been arrested, and I qualified what he was arrested for. No one else has been arrested to do with anything else that occurred on the legislative grounds.
Follow-up, Riley?
Okay, and I think this one was sort of alluded to earlier as well, but have all of the pieces of the statute been recovered at this point?
I don't know. I think I heard the same rumors that all of you have heard, that one of the statute parts may be missing, but that hasn't been verified for me.
Is there anyone I've missed? We've gone through 9 reporters. Is there anyone online I haven't spoken to? Unless there's something specific that hasn't been covered, I think we'll end it now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.